Good morning, my name is Cyclone Soz, and today we're going to be tracking the developing tropical cyclone over the Gulf of Carpentaria. There's been quite a few developments overnight. There's a big change in the forecast and also a big shift in the possible amount of rainfall expected for the eastern far north Queensland coastline, and we're also looking at a vastly different scenario in terms of intensity. So all of that plus a lot more coming up in today's weather update. Make sure you stick around to the end to get access to all of the information necessary to help you make the best decisions on this tropical threat, and also leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already, and click the join button down below to get access to some exclusive perks. So taking a look at the satellite imagery right now for the Arufa Sea and also the northern parts of the Northern Territory, you can see we already have a precursor low starting to develop, but it's over the town of Wadeye in the western parts of the Northern Territory. It's nowhere near the Gulf of Carpentaria, but we can see that there is some swirling pattern in these clouds. I know this is a very short loop. We're going to see if we can get 6 hours of data on this and really see if there is a defined loop starting to develop, but you can see that it looks like there might be a little swirl starting to happen in the lower levels, which is a little bit earlier than what we initially expected. I'm not 100% sure if this is the precursor low to the tropical cyclone that we could see in the Gulf of Carpentaria, but it will be very interesting to watch over the coming couple of days to see what this low pressure system does. It could swing into Western Australia, or it could move towards the Gulf of Carpentaria and be that little thing that ends up fueling the tropical cyclone. An increasing amount of thunderstorm activity already starting to become apparent as well in the Gulf of Carpentaria. There's quite a lot of thunderstorms starting to blow up right now in a very high wind shear environment, so it's not currently favourable for tropical cyclone genesis, but when we start to see these storms organise a lot more, that's when we're going to start to see the nice swirly banding features that would be associated with a forming tropical cyclone. That's something that we will be watching over the coming couple of days. By the way, when this system gets named, it will pick up the name of Lincoln, which is the next name on the Australian naming list, unless some system swoops in the next couple of days and takes that name, but I don't foresee that being a possibility at all. Let's jump into the forecast before we get bored of the satellite imagery. Well, that's a little bit of a spoiler alert, but we're looking at the ECMWF model first, because the ECMWF, as I said yesterday, was going to be the most reliable model here, and it turns out that now the GFS is on board with a similar intensity, and also the axis has completely backed out for its crazy intensity initially. The ECMWF calling for, as you saw, that Category 1 strength peak, which is in line with most of the forecast models. So we're looking at a weak tropical cyclone here starting to develop on Wednesday morning. That's going to develop around Groot Island in a very broad low before it takes till about Friday to actually get this defined low pressure system. And because of the storm's size and also how long it takes to really develop, I'm going to say that it's going to be in quite a hostile atmospheric environment where there'll be high wind shear. It will not be very pretty for tropical cyclones to develop. It will have a hard time getting itself going initially. But once it does get itself going, some intensification is certainly possible, and we see that on Friday night and into Saturday morning as it approaches the Northern Territory and Queensland border in the Gulf of Carpentaria. You can see as it moves just towards the west of Mornington Island, it's a tropical cyclone at this point, making landfall with peak wind gusts probably at around 70 to 80 kilometres an hour. It's really not that strong at all, impacting communities such as Gregory, Corumba and Burketon as well, and also onto Mornington Island. We could see some pretty strong wind gusts. I know from the remnants of Tropical Cyclone Kirrily that moved over Mornington Island, they saw wind gusts, I think, of up to 130 kilometres an hour. So there's a really good chance we see wind gusts in that realm with this system, because they're going to be as strong as each other. This will be a very messy and disorganised system as it makes landfall, but it will be broad, which means that its swathe of, say, powerful winds and heavy rainfall around its core will be quite large indeed. And you can see that with these gale force winds extending up towards Nhulunbuy, up towards Weipa and also Thursday Island as well. All through here we're seeing damaging wind gusts, and they even extend deep into the Northern Territory towards Tennant Creek and Elliot as well. We see some pretty strong wind gusts in there. But we'll switch back over to the wind forecast now. We're going to take a look at the GFS model. Now the GFS is a very, very similar picture to the ECMWF, and I've been going on in my previous updates about model congruency and how we like to see model congruency, because model congruency means that both forecast models, or all three forecast models, are expecting the same thing, and thus it's fairly likely that it's going to happen, because these forecast models, even though they have different biases and they look for different things in tropical systems, and that's how we get different scenarios, they all have the same plan in mind, and that's to forecast the weather. And if they're getting the same systems that spit out of their forecast model outputs, then we're likely to see the same scenario. We're now looking at the GFS. We're not expecting anything to really develop until about Wednesday in terms of tropical lows, but we see it on Wednesday happen across Groote Island, and then it'll move deeper into the Gulf of Carpentaria before strengthening slightly on Thursday and Friday, becoming a slightly more powerful tropical cyclone than what the ECMWF model has, and making a landfall on a very similar location just towards the east of Robinson River. As it moves inland into the Northern Territory, with probably peak wind gusts approaching 100 kilometres an hour and sustained winds maybe around 60 to 70 kilometres an hour as well for a lot of these locations, which would extend all the way from Groote Island through to Robinson River, Mornington Island, Burketon, Corumba, and then up towards Urracan and Weeka. There'll be some pretty strong winds up towards there as well. So yeah, even though it's a very similar forecast to the ECMWF model, it doesn't mean that we can completely rule out a significant amount of change in the forecast. And I'm just about to take you through the Access G3 model, which has a different scenario, but it's concerning for the amount of rainfall that it's going to drop. But just before that, I would like to say that over the coming couple of days, Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, it's very important that people in the Gulf of Carpentaria, around the Gulf of Carpentaria, monitor the forecast models closely, keep up to date with the Bureau of Meteorology, and also if you'd like the latest detailed updates, then subscribe to this channel as well. And by doing so, you'll get access to the latest information as it drops. I'll switch to twice daily updates pretty soon, considering this is a developing cyclone situation for Australia. But yeah, it's very important that you keep watching the forecast, and by around Wednesday and Thursday, we'll know exactly what the expected impacts of this system are, and I'll tell you exactly how to prepare, and earlier if needed, because this still will be a cyclone, and a cyclone is nothing to take lightly, and it's advised that you do take necessary precautions to protect homes and also livestock and so forth up in the Northern Territory and Queensland as this storm makes passage. So we'll take it back to Wednesday, and we're going to take a look at the Access G3 model, but we're going to completely skip over on winds because you can see the Access still calling for a tropical cyclone to materialise out of this, making landfall in a very different location just towards the south of Urracan and Weipa before moving over the Cape York Peninsula. But it's the rainfall factor that's got me really concerned. Just look at the amount of rainfall that the Access G3 model is expecting as it moves through the Cape York Peninsula and then very concerningly down towards Cairns and Townsville with this onshore flow. Now, this isn't completely as bad as what it looks like right now. The Access generally has a very big bias to overestimate in terms of rainfall because it has this huge thunderstorm bias. It's a great convective model, but it's a very bad tropical cyclone model because it just has this bias to blow up thunderstorms left, right, and centre around the storm, even though it might be in a very hostile environment. And that's likely what the scenario is going to be. But just look at how much rainfall is expected. And from this track that the Access G3 is suggesting, where it moves over the Cape York Peninsula, and we see this onshore flow driven between Cooktown down towards Townsville for what could be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then into Sunday, I would not be shocked if we're seeing rainfall totals approaching 1,000 millimetres from this forecast in just 4 days. And it's reciprocated in the peak rainfall accumulation. If we zoom right in here, there's a lot of locations. Belen and Kerr itself might see up to 1,200 millimetres of rainfall from the passage of this system. And then all along this sort of tropical Daintree coastline, 800 millimetres is possible. Widespread areas above 400 millimetres. Outside of Cardwell, 1,200 millimetres. And then down towards Ingham and Ware, Cyclone Curly made landfall, you're looking at up to 1,300 or 1,400 millimetres. Now, yes, I did mention that this is significantly overestimated from the Access G3, but it's also very concerningly a possible scenario as well, considering we're going to be seeing this tropical onshore flow onto the Queensland coastline. Now, is it worth worrying about and preparing right now for this severe amount of rainfall for locations around Cairns? Not yet. Around Tuesday or Wednesday, I'll have a very good idea on what's going to happen, so stick around for the Tuesday or the Wednesday update, or if you're not a fan of these updates, and also look at the Bureau of Meteorology's warnings and watches pages, because they'll also be giving you the official advice as well on what's going to be happening around this sort of area. But right now, it's not worth worrying about, it's just worth watching over. And if it does stick around like this, if this forecast sticks around like this and we see a model trend towards this scenario happening, that's when I'm going to be like, you should be preparing for a very significant flooding situation, because 1,000 millimeters on top of some locations already 2,000 millimeters, you're looking at a year's worth of rainfall in 2 months up here, and that is a lot of rainfall for a tropical part anywhere in the world actually. But 3,000 millimeters in 2 months for these locations, that is still a very, very big amount of rainfall, and it's nothing to shudder at, that's for sure. But yeah, we'll just dive back to the wind forecast for the Access G3 model and see what the model is actually expecting track-wise. You can see it moving down through the Cape York Peninsula on Friday, and then into Saturday it's going to move over communities such as Georgetown and Croydon, and then towards Gregory and Mount Isa before it completely dies off there. And it looks like by around Sunday it'll completely pull away from the Queensland coastline, and we'll see rainfall patterns start to ease. But we're not looking at a threat for gusty winds. It's just mainly going to be rainfall in a, unfortunately, very similar vein to how Cyclone Jasper dumped his rainfall across these locations here. So yeah, make sure you're listening out for Cyclone Lincoln, because he could be a pretty strong system in terms of maximum rainfall expected. What has concerned me over the past 24 hours is this big shift towards the east in terms of track forecast. I cited a few comments yesterday about how likely it was for this to jump across the Cape York Peninsula and then impact Cairns and Townsville, as some storms do, and it is a slightly more likely scenario at this time. It's not set in stone, it's not certain, but it is still a relatively likely scenario, and it's a scenario that I'll be watching very closely over the forecast, just to make sure that we don't get caught off guard again on the far north Queensland coastline, because there is a chance that locations north of Townsville will receive a very significant amount of rainfall. And yeah, it's a chance that has been increasing over the past 24 hours. So once again, stay up to date with the forecast model, stay up to date with the Bureau of Meteorology, and stay up to date with this channel as well to see what is in store for your location, and also how to prepare adequately for a situation like this where we could be seeing a very significant amount of rainfall occur. Now, sticking with the Access G3 model, let's take a look over the next 10 days at rainfall expected over the nation. One or two locations, especially in central Queensland, could pick up some pretty strong thunderstorms over the coming 10 days, and that could lead to accumulations approaching 100 millimeters. And across on locations such as Rockhampton and Bundaberg, we'll be seeing these squall lines move through every couple of days over there. We could be seeing up to 100 millimeters from a relatively stormy phase that we're likely to enter. And this rainfall extends down in towards New South Wales and the northern reaches of New South Wales, and then down towards the Gold Coast and the Sunshine Coast as well. Apart from that, though, there might be one or two wet spots across Western Australia. I don't think it's reciprocated across other forecast models, but it looks like we might finally get a bit of rainfall down towards Western Australia and Perth and that sort of area over the next 10 days. And let me tell you, that is much needed rainfall, that's for sure. So yeah, it looks like we might finally have a little bit of reprieve to the drought that we're currently well and truly in right now. And the heat, please, can we get rid of this heat, because it is unbearable. 44 yesterday, very, very warm indeed. I had to sit on 60 kilometers an hour on Roe Highway because, I mean, the road was just so hot. I was worried that my tires were going to blow up. So very, very warm conditions down in Perth as well. I know it's nothing on what central Western Australia can throw up. They can see 50 degrees Celsius days up there. That's blisteringly hot, but still for Perth residents, 44 degrees is certainly pushing the mercury, that's for sure. I think the official maxima in Perth was about 42, but combined with the urban heat island effect, you're looking at some temperatures, and it feels like temperatures approaching sort of 44 or 46 degrees Celsius in some locations. So very, very warm indeed. And I do hope that everyone's staying cool there, but it looks like we might see a little bit of reprieve to the heat there. And I think that's the first time that Perth has had a proper mention on this channel as well, considering just how nothing apart from extreme heat has been happening there this summer. It's been a really hot summer, that's for sure. For avid viewers, yesterday we were looking at some very high temperatures next Monday across northern parts of Western Australia. We'll be seeing these widespread areas approaching 50 degrees, and they are still there on the forecast, 49 to 50 degrees for a lot of locations. But I mean, just look at this big swathe of 45 degree temperatures, plus extending down towards Rulweena, and also down towards Kalgoorlie, Norseman, Lannister and Mount Magnet as well. Really warm temperatures indeed, and it looks like Perth should miss out on those, thankfully. And I think it looks like it dies off by around Tuesday when we see a bit of a cool change start to take place. But yeah, that basically does it for this forecast video. If you did enjoy it, then please do consider leaving a like, and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Your support really does mean a lot. That is all from me. Stay up to date with more updates on the Bureau of Meteorology and also on this channel, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.